3 women brutally tortured, whipped, and unalived her. Emily Kelly's fiance was in prison, so Emily was left to take care of her fiance's 7-year-old daughter, Jordan Duncan. Emily's mom, and Emily's daughter all lived in the same house, taking care of Jordan. Jordan was taken out of school for 40 days, and still no one was sent to check on her. The 3 women would aggressively stab and abuse Jordan with sharp objects. Jordan was constantly tied up and confined inside a bathtub, unable to move. Investigators found 90 fresh wounds and 20 old scars all over Jordan's body. These wounds and scars came from the women repeatedly whipping Jordan with an electrical cord. Text messages were found between the women stating, "You can't hit her face. You gotta hit her body if you're going to hit her. That's another thing we gotta hide." There is a video of Jordan clearly struggling and in pain while Emily's mother is mockingly singing in the background. Jordan passed away at only 7 years old due to the extreme abuse. None of the 3 women have been sentenced yet because they were just recently arrested. I honestly just wish that maybe someone was sent to check on Jordan while she was living with these 3 evil women, and maybe she would have still been alive today. But what do you guys think about this case?
This guy walked into an elementary school one morning, but the timeline of response is what left people demanding answers. 18-year-old Salvador Ramos had recently dropped out of high school and reportedly been struggling with personal issues. In the days leading up to the attack, he had made several online posts hinting at what he was going to do. On March 26 of 2022, Salvador and his 66-year-old grandmother had gotten into an argument over his failure to graduate from high school. It had gotten so bad that he ended up shooting her in the face. He left the home and took her black 2008 Ford F-150. Using his Facebook account, Salvador messaged this 15-year-old girl from Germany, and he was telling her when he was going to shoot his grandmother, when he successfully shot her, and now he was telling her that he was going to shoot up an elementary school, and this girl just said, "Cool." Luckily, his grandmother survived and she was able to get help from the neighbors while they called police officers. Salvador ended up crashing his grandmother's truck through a barricade onto a concrete ditch right outside Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. He walked right onto that elementary school campus wearing a tactical vest, backpack, all black clothing, and he had a weapon with him. Salvador entered that school and tragedy would begin around 11:32 a.m. and once it hit 11:43 a.m., the school was placed on a lockdown. As he was walking down 2 short hallways, he entered a classroom that was connected to another classroom, rooms 111 and 112. A teacher named Idema Garcia was trying to lock the classroom's door, but Salvador shot through the door's window and he told her goodnight and he ended her life. Once he made it into that classroom, he told all of the children, "You're all going to die," and then he opened fire. He supposedly played sad music while doing this, and then he scooped all of the blood and wrote LOL on the board. Salvador was inside of that classroom for over an hour while officers were outside of the building. One student pretended to be deceased by smearing blood onto her face from her classmate, and luckily she survived. Around 12:50 p.m., officers finally made their way into that classroom and ended the life of Salvador. When officers got that 911 call, they were outside of the school's building within minutes, but they didn't confront Salvador until much later. By the time tragedy was over, 19 students and 2 teachers lost their lives, devastating their families and the entire community.
This wannabe influencer ended the life of her own 3-year-old daughter, all because the child was interrupting her hookup session. So her name is Nicola Priest. She's a teenager living in the UK. And if there were a hall of fame of the most selfish, self-centered, downright cruelest person walking this planet, her photo would be front and center. Because Nicola cared about exactly one thing: becoming famous on social media. She dreamed about being a model, going viral, and being the girl that everyone envied. But when she turned 17, something happened that for most people it would be the best news imaginable, but for her it was a nightmare. She found out she was pregnant. Nicola wasn't excited, she was furious, because in her mind, becoming a mom would ruin her whole hot girl aesthetic. Hot girl wear. And on January 31st, 2017, she gave birth, reluctantly, to a ridiculously cute baby girl named Kaylee. And this is just my opinion. opinion, but I think the moment she held that baby, she got an idea. Not a loving maternal one, a twisted one. She realized, I can do this whole young mom thing for social media clout. So online, she's posting these TikTok dances, acting like this loving, fun mom, but in real life, Kaylee is not her daughter. She's a prop. Nicola's mom and sister are the ones doing the real parenting, feeding her, changing her, actually loving her, while Nicola is over here too busy with her phone, her content, and her makeup. And when her family tells her to step the fuck up, she takes it as an insult. So when Kaylee's about 18 months old, Nicola packs up, takes her daughter, and moves out, cutting her family off completely. She moves in with her new boyfriend Daniel. He's not Kaylee's biological dad, but he treats her like his own. Nicola is still Nicola, all about herself. At some point, she gets pregnant again in early 2020 and has a baby boy. You'd think having 2 kids and a decent partner would make her grow up, but no. A few weeks after the baby's born, she dumps Daniel and rekindles with an old classmate of hers named Callum Redfern. Now Callum, horrible. Not in it for the relationship, not in it for the kids. He's just here for hookups and whatever amount of money he could just squeeze out of her. And Nicola gives him hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars while living on benefits with 2 small children. The priority list of parents nowadays is actually astonishing. From the moment he started coming around, Kaylee's life went from bad to unbearable. She's rarely getting fed, rarely even bathed, and just locked away for hours inside of an empty room with nothing but a dirty mattress on the floor. Her play area is just a tiny little table and chair shoved into the corner while the rest of the house is perfectly decorated. And whenever Nicola finally pays attention to her, it's just violence. She's always hitting her in the head and calling her a brat. Neighbors would hear the crying, the shouting, the banging, and whenever Kaylee would cry too loud, Nicola would just blast music and drown it out. And they would joke about it over text message, saying things like, "Ugh, I'm gonna kill her. She used one of her diapers." That's the point of diapers. She's 3. And whenever Nicola would beat her, Callum would say things like, "Good, give her one for me too. I would rather end my own than deal with her." Say this with me. Not everyone is meant to be a parent. Then comes August 8th, 2020. Earlier that day, CCTV footage catches Nicola taking Kaylee out. She's walking ahead like Kaylee doesn't even exist. There's no hand holding, no slowing down, no acknowledgement that your daughter's right here. And when they get back, Callum invites a friend over. So now there's 3 adults in this apartment. So what's the first thing they do? Lock Kaylee up in her room. And then while the friend is still there, Callum and Nicola hook up. But then Kaylee starts crying. I mean, she's alone and scared in this dark room, probably hungry, but to them, she's interrupting. They storm into her room and we don't know exactly what they did to her. Let's just imagine the worst, and whatever it was left Kaylee violently sick, like throwing up over and over everywhere. And after Callum and his friend leave, Nicola doesn't comfort her. She doesn't call for help. She takes selfies. Like, as a mom, what are you doing? And then she texts Callum saying, "Oh my god, I had so much fun." And then she just casually adds, "Oh yeah, Kaylee's throwing up a lot, lol," and then just goes to bed. The next morning, Nicola walks into Kaylee's room but finds her on the floor, cold to the touch and not breathing. She calls the emergency services, but at that point it's too late and police arrest them both. And this part's actually insane because when they get questioned, they immediately started pointing fingers like, "She did it, no, he did it." But since police couldn't prove who actually delivered the fatal blow, they were released and both sent home. And Nicola goes straight back into making her TikTok dances like nothing happened. When Kaylee's autopsy was released, her injuries were so bad it looked like she was hit by a speeding car. You guys, she was 3 years old. Nicola only got 15 years and Callum got 14, and they're both eligible for early release. Apparently, you can take a child's life and not even get life in prison. I would not have thought that a case like this would end with such injustice. Rest in peace, Kaylee. You genuinely deserve so much. I honestly don't even know what else to say right now. I will see you in my next video. Mwah, group hug.
She was kidnapped, beaten, stabbed, and then buried alive in a shallow grave. What happens next will leave you speechless. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Young Suk An. In October of 2022, 42-year-old Young was going through a very contentious separation from her husband, 53-year-old Che An. Their separation actually got so bad that Young filed an order of protection against Che on the grounds of domestic violence. The couple would get into very intense, fiery arguments, and the centre point of most of their arguments was money.
Che wanted to leave Young with nothing. He wanted her on the bones of her ass, scrimping and scraping, not even managing to get by. But she wasn't having any of it. She was going to be the main caretaker of their children, and so rightfully so, she was going to fight for her equal split of any of their money. On the 16th of October, Che would arrive at Young's house in Lacey, Washington, unannounced, uninvited, and unwanted. Sensing that an argument was about to commence, sent the children out to a corner shop so that they didn't have to hear it. Che would then go off on one on Young, and once again he was arguing about money, and she decided she wasn't going to be listening to this tonight. She ordered him to leave her house before spinning on her heels and walking to her bedroom. Che didn't leave though. He followed her. He would storm into the bedroom and from behind punched Young in the head several times before dragging her to the floor. Using duct tape, he then restrained her, tying her arms and her legs together and likely gagged her. Young had tried her best to fight Che off, however he had caught her by surprise and completely overpowered her. Thinking on her feet, however, using the Apple Watch on her wrist, she called 911. The operator on the other end would describe hearing thumping noises and moans. It sounded like someone was gagged. There was some muffling and some banging until the line went completely quiet and cut off. Officers were quickly dispatched to the scene, but by the time that they arrived, Che was already gone and he had taken Young with him. After realising that Young had called 911 from her Apple Watch, Che would smash it with a hammer while it was still on her wrist. He then dragged her down to the basement, forced her inside of the car and drove off. The officers would arrive to the scene so quickly that they actually passed Che on the road, not realising who it was, having no idea that they should be pulling that man over. When they arrived, they could see that the garage door was still left open. It was clear that whoever left had done so in a hurry. Shortly after, the children would arrive back home and they told the officers that they'd only been out the house about half an hour, and before they left, both of their parents were still in the house, Young Sukan and Che Ann. After running both of their names, it would flag up that Young had that order of protection against Che for domestic violence and quickly realised that she was in grave danger. Che Ann drove Young 20 minutes away, making his way to some woodland. He then got out of the car and buried a shallow grave before returning to the car to pull Young out. Before throwing her into the hole, he told her, quote, "You're going to die," before stabbing her in the chest. She would then be thrown into the hole in the ground, still bound, likely still gagged, lay in pain and terror as Che began to throw dirt over her, burying her alive. For the next 12 hours, Young lay inside of this shallow grave, struggling to breathe because of all the dirt on top of her, but she wasn't ready to die. Using all of her energy, she would claw and dig her way out of the shallow grave before she made her way to the surface where she gasped for air. She then took to her feet and sprinted through the woodland. She was running for around about 20 minutes until she finally came upon a house and started braying on the door, waking the resident up inside, begging for their help. She would tell the resident, quote, "My husband is trying to kill me. Help. He is still out in the woods." This resident would help Young. They allowed her inside of their home. Despite how she looked, she was covered from head to toe in dirt and had obviously been profusely bleeding. When the paramedics and the officers arrived, Young would be transported to a hospital to be treated for her injuries. And she would go on to survive the horrific ordeal. Che Ann would be found and arrested the following day. He was still creeping around inside of the woodland and was handed a sentence of 13 years imprisonment.
People are being warned not to play this dark web game alone, but no one is actually saying what happens if you do. This game is called Conexión, and it's basically a hidden website people claim lets you communicate with someone who is deceased. But it's not found through a simple Google search. You can't just go searching for it. You will get a link sent to you privately, usually through WhatsApp, and once you click on the link, you won't be able to click on it again. Most people say it comes with one message: don't play it alone. Before you even open the site, you need to have a setup. You'll need a black candle, a photo of the person you're trying to contact, and headphones. Then you'll have to do something really strange. You'll have to write your name completely backwards, and then under that, you're going to write your date of death. Even if you don't know it, you just have to guess. Between 2 to 3 in the morning, you'll open the link. There's no home page, no buttons, it's just a black screen. Immediately, you'll hear whispering through your headphones. You light the candle, place the photo in front of you, and then you'll see a message that says, "Do you want to hear them?" It's going to ask you 3 times, and every single time you have to say yes. At first you will just hear static, but then a voice will start to come through. And people swear it sounds exactly like their loved ones. But something is wrong. They're crying, panicking. Instead of comforting you, they say, "Why would you do this? They're coming for you now." That's when people start to panic. They get off of the website, rip off their headphones, blow out the candle, but what happens after that, no one really explains.
I don't think that I've ever come across a story that fills me with such dread quite like this one. And it's not even just because these girls got lost in the wilderness. It's because when their camera was found months later, it contained these really disturbing photos taken in the dead of night, with absolutely no explanation as to why they took them. And when their remains were found a couple months after that, some of their bones looked like they had been bleached. And not to mention, they were alive somewhere in the forest while an active search was being conducted for them, yet they still suffered a terrible fate. This is the mysterious death of Chris Kramers and Lizanne Froon, otherwise known as the Panama Girls. This story is incredibly disturbing, and there are no real answers, so let's talk about it. Chris Kramers and Lizanne Froon were 21 and 22-year-old friends who grew up in the Netherlands. They were described as really outgoing, creative, and incredibly smart girls. Chris had just completed her studies in cultural social education with a focus on art, and Lizanne had recently graduated with a degree in applied psychology. They shared a love of volunteering and wanting to help the community, and in early March of 2014, the two moved in together in a dorm room in Amersfoort. Everyone knew they were best friends and pretty much inseparable, and they even worked at the same cafe together. Since Lizanne had just graduated, the two wanted to plan a special vacation to celebrate, so they'd been saving up for about 6 months to take a trip to Panama. They wanted to spend the time learning Spanish and volunteering at local schools in Panama to teach children arts and crafts. This was going to be such an exciting trip for them, but not long after arriving, they would disappear. And what followed, despite horrific, has never been explained. On March 15th, 2014, Chris and Lizanne arrived in Panama, and they toured the country for about 2 weeks before landing in Bouquet, Cherokee. The girls decided to stay with the local host family while they volunteered teaching children in the community. They'd only planned to stay for about 4 more weeks, but it would soon become clear that they would never leave. On April 1st, 2014, Chris and Lizanne took the host family's dog, with their approval, and set out to hike the El Pianista Trail. They specifically wanted to hike the wilderness surrounding the Baru volcano, but before they did, the girls were last seen having brunch with 2 Dutchmen that they met while on the trip. There, they posted on Facebook that they wanted to walk around Bouquet and then go on this hike. After brunch, Chris, Lizanne, and the dog took off for said hike, never to be seen again. That night, the host family became concerned when their dog returned home safe and sound, but alone. The girls never made it back, so this is when they started looking around their home, but they found nothing. By the next day, Chris and Lizanne had missed an appointment with a local tour guide, and this is when the family knew something was horribly wrong. So they reported them missing to the police, who then took off searching for the girls. At this point, neither of the families were able to get a hold of the girls, which was odd since they talked daily. They would usually send them updates about their trip. After a few days of no contact, both of the girls' families went to Panama along with detectives from the Netherlands, and from there on, a full-scale search was conducted. This was a massive search too, involving local police, tracking dogs, and helicopters, and their focus was on the El Pianista Trail since that's where they were last known to be. This trail is known to kind of start out easy, but as you progress, it gets pretty dangerous and it's so dense and rugged. It is definitely not an easy place to search, but after combing through the jungle for 10 days, absolutely nothing was found. This left investigators stumped and no one really knew what had happened. But a little over 2 months later, Lizanne's backpack was found. It was reportedly found by a local woman pinned against a rock in a really fast-moving river. This was near the village of Alto Romero in the middle of the jungle, and this was not close to the trail where they last went hiking on at all. In fact, this was about a 14-hour hike from the top of the El Pianista Trail. Inside her backpack was 2 pairs of sunglasses, $88 in cash, Lizanne's insurance card, a water bottle, some of their clothes, Lizanne's camera, and both of their phones. And the worst part is that both of their phones were in good condition. This was finally a clue into what possibly happened to the girls, but after going through their phone records, what they found is so incredibly disturbing. From the day they started their hike to April 11th, which was 10 days after they went missing, the girls tried calling the police for help 77 times. Since they were in the middle of the jungle, they didn't have any reception, so only one of the calls went through, and that one dropped after only 2 seconds. Records show that about 6 hours into their hike, someone called 112, which is the international emergency number used in Panama, and 911. The first call was made on Chris's phone at 4:39 p.m., and about 10 minutes minutes later, they tried calling for help again on Lizanne's phone. Like I said earlier, over a period of 10 days, they continued trying to call for help, but none of them ever went through due to having no signal. Why they tried calling for help is still a mystery, but it's assumed that one of them got hurt and they were trying to call for help after possibly getting lost. Lizanne's phone died on April 4th, 3 days after the girls went missing, and it was never used again. But what's really odd though is that between April 5th and 11th, Chris's phone was turned on and off a handful of times, probably trying to look for a signal. But during those times, a wrong PIN code was entered, so they weren't able to actually unlock the phone. If that was one of the girls doing that, no one knows. But it's really odd that the PIN was repeatedly entered wrong. On April 11th, Chris's phone was turned off for the last time at 11:56 a.m. What's really devastating to think about is the fact that while this was all happening and they were trying to call for help, there was an active search for them being conducted not just by police, but by their families in the same jungle, yet they were never found. If you think that was disturbing, wait until you see what they found on their camera. So the camera contained photos of the girls starting their hike, and the first few photos show them taking a trail at the overlook of the Continental Divide. This was the last photo ever taken of the two, and after that, photos show them walking deeper and deeper into the jungle, and this was just hours before that first initial 911 call. Nothing appeared too unusual at first until police stumbled across these. These were taken on April 8th, and these were some of the last photos that the girls ever took. 90 photos were taken to be exact in the dead of night between the hours of 1 and 4 a.m. They showed the girls' belongings spread out on some rocks, and it looked like they were possibly near a river. This is the image that truly does it for me though. It's the last photo ever taken on the camera, and it's of the back of Chris's head. Some say that it looks like she's bleeding in it, but I'm not entirely sure. It's so scary to me that only a few of these photos are clear, but the rest of them showed nothing but darkness. So because Lizanne's backpack was found, this sparked a new search along the Culera River, and this is when authorities found some of their clothes on some surrounding rocks just a short distance from where the backpack was found. And 2 months later, another disturbing discovery would be made. Not far from where the backpack was found, authorities found a broken pelvis and a woman's boot with a foot still inside of it. In total, 33 bones were found scattered along the same riverbank, and after DNA testing, it was confirmed that they belonged to Chris and Lizanne. But here's the thing. Lizanne's bones seemed to have decomposed naturally as she still had some skin attached to the bone, but Chris's bones looked like they had been bleached. Whether or not that was from sun exposure, which is typically normal, we don't know. But aside from Chris's broken pelvis, which authorities don't know if that happened before or after her death, the bones were in pristine condition. There weren't any marks or signs of trauma, but combined, only 15% of their bones were ever found. A post-mortem examination confirmed some animal activity, meaning it's likely that the rest of their bones were carried away by wild animals. Because there were no signs of trauma and how little of the bones were found, their cause of death could not be determined. Although to this day we don't know what happened to the girls, there are a few theories. One being that they possibly had an accident during their hike, with one of them getting hurt. That sparked them trying to call the police for help, but when they couldn't get a signal, they decided to hunker down and camp out for the night with the intention of trying to hike for help in the morning. Then when morning came, it's possible that they just went the wrong way along the steep riverbed where they would eventually be found. This led them deeper and deeper into the jungle with no way out. Then they just died of exposure after not being found. Investigators believe Chris possibly died on the night those photos were taken, which was the 8th. Their theory is that Lizanne took those photos to try and help her, maybe trying to use the flash to see. Or it's possible that they heard someone or something out there in the wilderness and used the flash to either scare them away or get their attention. Maybe then Lizanne tried to hike away on her own for help, but died in the process. No one knows for sure if they tried walking along the Changuinola River, which is known to locals as the Grinder. It's a really dangerous spot with sudden flash floods, and you have to cross a lot of really old rope bridges over the water. It's just a really dangerous area that even locals avoid. So it could be a possibility that they tried doing this and just accidentally died. Another theory is that the girls were met with foul play out there in the jungle and that someone else was involved. Some question whether or not the backpack was planted, but to me it kind of seems unlikely that it was. But one thing that kind of fuels this theory is the fact that no one knows who took those last known photos on the camera or why, and the fact that the wrong pin was entered on the phone several times. That doesn't seem right, considering the girls probably knew each other's passwords. But I truly don't think we will ever know what happened unless they find the rest of their remains. 2 years ago, it was said that a couple of journalists planned to go back and search a dam at the end of the river, because according to them, Panama authorities never tried looking for the rest of their remains. They just closed the case as undetermined and kind of just said that it must have been an accident, mainly because of the dangerous terrain. A lot of people question how this case was handled back when it initially happened. All I know is that I've never felt such dread when reading about a case like I have with this one. The entire thing is something straight out of a nightmare, and the fact that there aren't really even any answers is terrifying. But it's now been 11 years, and whatever happened to Chris and Lizanne out there in the wilderness remains a mystery.
The time that someone killed 7 people with poisoned Tylenol and got away with it. On the morning of September 29th, 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman woke up that morning feeling sick. Mary was her parents' only child, and they were unable to have more children, so her parents were very protective over 12-year-old Mary. They allowed their daughter to stay home from school and gave her some Tylenol for her symptoms, but within minutes of taking the medicine, 12-year-old Mary collapsed on the floor and began convulsing. By 10 a.m., the 12-year-old girl was dead. And on that exact same day, 6 other people in the Chicago area would die after taking Tylenol. 27-year-old Mary Reiner, who had just gotten home from the hospital after giving birth to her 4th baby. 31-year-old single mother Mary McFarland. 35-year-old Paula Prince. And 27-year-old Adam Janis, 25-year-old Stanley Janis, and 19-year-old Teresa Janis, the last 3 victims all coming from the same family. Married father of 2, Adam Janis, woke up that morning feeling kind of sick, so he stayed home from work and took some extra strength Tylenol, but within minutes collapsed on the floor. He was rushed to the hospital where he died of a suspected heart attack. His loved ones were shocked and devastated. He was only 27 years old, so all of his family members went back to his house to mourn and comfort his wife and his 2 children. Adam's younger brother Stanley and Stanley's new wife Teresa were both at the house, and they both had gotten headaches from crying so much. So they both decided to take some extra strength Tylenol that was still left out from when Adam had taken it that morning, and within minutes, they both collapsed on the floor, making it 3 deaths from the same family, all on the exact same day. But it was because 3 members of the same family all died after taking Tylenol that investigators were able to quickly link all of these suspicious deaths to Tylenol and likely saved more lives. The Tylenol had all been poisoned with a lethal amount of potassium cyanide, anywhere from 3 times to 1,000 times the lethal amount. Very quickly, news spread of poisoned medicine. There was mass panic. Police officers were driving through the streets of Chicago with loudspeakers, warning people to throw out their Tylenol. Poison control numbers were ringing off the hook, and emergency rooms throughout the entire country were packed of people suspecting they had been poisoned. Johnson & Johnson, who owns Tylenol, did a nationwide recall of the medicine, which costed the company over $100 million. The police and FBI were baffled how someone was able to poison all these pills because all of the victims had bought their Tylenol from different stores, and those stores all got their Tylenol from different factories, meaning that the one responsible had to buy the Tylenol from the stores, go home, lace it with a bunch of potassium cyanide, and then take those pill bottles and put them back on the shelves so the unsuspected victims would buy them. A week after the murders, Johnson & Johnson received a letter from a man claiming to be the one responsible and said that the deaths would end if Johnson & Johnson transferred $1 million to their bank account. The author of the letter was a man named James Lewis, and the bank account that he wanted the ransom sent to belonged to a man that Lewis felt owed his wife $511, meaning that James Lewis was trying to frame this man for 7 murders over a $500 debt. They decided to look more into this James Lewis guy, and honestly, he has quite a sketchy past. When he was 19 years old, he tried to kill his mom with an axe, and then when he was in his later adult years, he was suspected of killing this other guy, and honestly, he probably did it. The evidence was quite compelling, but he was acquitted on a technicality. He had recently moved to Chicago before the murders and was living under a fake name, trying to escape some fraud charges in another state. They never had enough evidence to charge him with the Chicago Tylenol murders, but he did spend 13 years in prison for extortion. But after his release from prison, he published a book about people being randomly poisoned that he just called Poison. He was never charged, but people believe that he is the most likely suspect. Another suspect is the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, who killed 3 and injured over 20 by sending bombs through the mail. If you guys want me to cover the Unabomber in its own video, just let me know. The Unabomber's first victims were in Chicago, and internet sleuths actually think that they've linked him to another death that happened 2 months before the Chicago murders, where a man named Jay Mitchell in Wyoming was killed after taking cyanide-laced Tylenol, possibly like a test
run for the attack in Chicago. And there's Ronald Arnold, who's been like linked to a couple of the victims, and he was in a bar shortly after the deaths, bragging about being the one responsible. The bar owner told the police about his suspicious comments, and in his house they found some weird like crime manuals, some manuals on poison, and they also found some chemistry equipment, but never enough evidence to actually charge him. Suspiciously enough, Arnold was so upset about the bar owner turning him in for these suspicious comments he was making after the deaths that he returned to the bar at night and shot and killed a man that he thought was the bar owner, but it wasn't. It was just an innocent man, father of 3, a case of mistaken identity. Over the years, there's been a lot of suspects. Some actually theorize that the ones responsible were like a Johnson & Johnson Tylenol competitor who wanted to tank the company, while others have theorized that maybe one of the 7 victims was the primary target and the other 6 victims were collateral damage. But despite being one of the most investigated crimes to ever happen in America, this case has still gone unsolved now for over 40 years. Really interested to hear what theory you guys think is the most likely. Is it one of the ones I've said, or do you guys have your own theory about what you think happened in Chicago in 1982? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. While you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Until then, I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys in the next video.
So this man straight up fakes his own death just to cash out his life insurance money. His name's John Darwin, and all this guy wants to be is filthy rich, which like, who doesn't? But instead of working hard like a normal person, this dude is out here chasing every ridiculous get-rich-quick scheme he can find. Like, for example, he once made his 2 sons go door to door selling random junk. And another time, he was breeding exotic reptiles like African lizards, snakes, all that weird stuff. And when that failed, he started painting garden gnomes to sell. And I'm like, sir, these aren't exactly $1-million business ideas. So then he drags his wife Anne into all of this nonsense, convincing her that real estate is gonna be their golden ticket. But instead of actually learning how any of this works, he just starts buying house after house after house. And eventually they end up owning over 14 houses. Now, with all these properties, his mortgage payments every month are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, until John and Anne are drowning in over $1 million of debt and on the verge of complete bankruptcy. Look, I don't know a thing about real estate, but even I saw that coming. Now, instead of doing the obvious thing like filing for bankruptcy, John is like, nah, that's too embarrassing. Because John's brilliant idea to get out of the situation is to fake his own death. And he tells Anne, what if I just die in a canoe accident and you collect all the insurance money? And at first, Anne's like, my guy, just file for bankruptcy, take the L and move on. And John basically tells her, look, I'd only have to vanish for a couple of weeks, and after that, we can collect over $300,000. And according to Anne, she says that John pressured her into all of this, but I honestly feel like that's just a complete lie. Because I think once she heard about how much money she can collect, her eyes went cha-ching, and she went right along with it. So one day in 2002, John drags his red canoe down to the sea, he paddles out for a bit, and then he stages this little scene to make it look like something went terribly wrong. Meanwhile, Anne is waiting on the other side to pick him up and drive home. And just like that, the con begins. She starts playing the grieving wife card perfectly, saying, oh my god, my husband's missing. And police obviously believed her, because why wouldn't they trust a seemingly devastated widow? Investigators launched this massive search party with helicopters, lifeboats, and dozens of people searching over 62 square miles of water. And eventually they find bits and pieces of John's canoe wreckage and a paddle floating in the water, but no John. And just like they planned, it really looked like a tragic accident. And after days of finding nothing, people just assumed that he must have drowned. But what confused everyone is that John was an experienced kayaker, and the water that day was calm as hell. But without a body, there's no way to prove anything other than the fact that he must have drowned. So about a year later, in 2003, John is officially declared dead, which means Anne can finally start collecting that insurance money payout. But here's what actually pissed me off. John and Anne had plotted this scheme so well that even their own sons didn't know about it. So you mean to tell me you made your own children mourn the loss of their father and let them believe he was gone for the next 5 years? The emotional damage they caused those kids is absolutely unforgivable. Now you're probably wondering, how did John stay hidden for so long without getting caught? So let me tell you. John and Anne owned the house right next to theirs because remember, they were real estate agents. The building shared a common wall, so they built a tiny passage that connected the 2 houses, and that's where John lived for the next 5 years. But eventually he gets bored out of his mind and decides he wants to get out. But obviously he can't just stroll into town as himself since he's supposed to be dead. So he develops this disguise. hat, coat, beard, and to really sell it, he gives himself a fake limp. But here's the thing, John isn't really Hollywood material, and his disguise is absolutely awful. It's like when Superman takes off his glasses, except somehow even less convincing. And one of the neighbors literally sees him and goes, "Aren't you supposed to be dead?" And John just says, "Don't tell anybody," and runs off. And with all this pressure, they decide they need to flee the country, but there's one tiny problem. To leave, you need a passport, and John can't get one because, you know, he's dead. So he hatches part 2 of his plan, stealing an identity. So one random day, he just visits the local library in his terrible disguise, looking for records of dead people who were born around the same time he was. And eventually, he finds the identity of a baby who had passed away just 5 weeks after it was born. His name was John Jones. So now we have John pretending to be John, which is really confusing because that's a lot of Johns. So he uses this unalive baby's identity to get a birth certificate, and now he plans to use this new identity to get a passport. But to apply for a passport in the UK, you need a signature from someone respectable like a doctor, a priest, or a librarian. So John befriends the local librarian. He hands her the birth certificate, gets the signature, and just walks away with a brand new passport. John and Anne decide to move to the US, specifically Panama City, Florida, because it looked like the perfect paradise for their new life. But this is where their little scam actually starts falling apart completely. After arriving, they start house hunting, and they found one that they really loved, and they bought it immediately. And that's when their realtor takes a picture of them and posts it onto their website to show their super happy clients. Which seems totally normal, except this photo is about to destroy everything, but we'll get to that in a second. So after buying the house, they also wanted to buy a $270,000 ranch to convert it into a canoeing resort. And apparently they didn't learn from their previous failed businesses because they don't even have enough money to cover it. They kind of ran through their entire life insurance money already. So they decide that Anne will fly all the way back to the UK and sell all of their properties while John stays in Panama City living his fake dead man paradise life. But that's when he realized if they wanted to live in the US permanently, he would need an American visa. But to get that, he needs a letter from the UK police saying that he's a good citizen and has no criminal record, but obviously he can't do that because again, he's supposed to be dead. So John returns back to the UK and does something incredibly stupid. He walks into the police station and tells them, "I think I'm a missing person," claiming that he has no memory of the last 5 years and that he has amnesia. Am I the only one getting secondhand embarrassment from this? Meanwhile, Anne is over here putting on the performance of the year. She's jumping for joy while their sons are over here confused, but I mean, they're glad he's alive. But here's the thing, John did not return back to the UK just to give himself up. Oh no. He was hoping to trick police so that way he can get what he needed for his American visa. But what John didn't know is that police had already been secretly investigating Anne because her behavior after his passing had sent massive red flags. For starters, she was spending tons of money out of nowhere. She quit her job and suddenly moved to Panama. And employees at her old job said they would see her whispering like she was talking to somebody that she shouldn't be. Oh, and plus, multiple people had already seen John's crappy disguise and knew it was him, so the jig was basically already up. And then, maybe it was bad luck or karma, but a British journalist found the photos that John and Anne took with the realtor in Panama. And with that photo, there's nothing you can really say. They were already busted and their whole elaborate scheme just came crashing down. John gets arrested on December 7th of 2007 and gets sentenced to only 6 years and 3 months in prison. And then Anne gets arrested the next day, but she pleads not guilty, claiming that John forced her to do everything. But obviously nobody believes her because she is clearly just as involved, and she also gets 6 years in prison. Please do not be like these selfish idiots. Just go to therapy or file for bankruptcy instead of faking your own death. I love you guys. I will see you in my next video. Mwah, group hug.
Is this a murder case or a survival story? I don't know. I feel like I need your help. It was 2008 when couple John and Samantha Jones made a big decision. The married couple originally lived in Somerset, but they had big dreams of moving abroad. They'd been on holiday to this unreal island called Langkawi, and they just couldn't get enough of the place. And they were like, ideally, we'd want to move there. And after looking online, they realized actually we could get a visa, we could do this. So they moved to a lush villa, and everybody back home was super jealous. But the relationship was just not as perfect as people thought. John had kids with his ex-wife, so in theory, that shouldn't be a problem. However, when he's moved abroad, that obviously means he's going to have to keep flying back. He also had a massive drink problem, and when he drank, he was very aggressive. And it kind of seemed like once they'd moved abroad, he became even worse. He got more controlling, more violent. He was taking his anger out on Samantha all the time. And I feel like maybe, I don't know what you think, but the fact that they moved abroad did kind of contribute contribute to this. It kind of went under the radar because Samantha was actually too scared to speak up and ask anyone for help just because of how taboo domestic violence is in that country. In one argument, he even broke Samantha's jaw, but it gets worse. At one point, mid-row, he pulls out a sword. Samantha was really struggling with this, thinking like, if I even reach out for help, is anybody gonna help me? Every time he was out drinking, Samantha would sit at home and she'd be shaking, just waiting to see what kind of mood he was when he came home. And on the 18th of October 2018, John was about to arrive home and Samantha braced herself. As he arrived at the door, Samantha was there. He just full on punched her in the face out of nowhere. She fell back, shielding her face as she cowered on the floor and kind of tried to process what had just happened. And he just started kicking her on the ground over and over and over. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the kitchen drawer and she was immediately like, I need to try and protect myself here. She grabbed a long kitchen knife and sprinted to the bathroom to try and get to safety. But he was up in her face, taunting her, go on, stab me. He carried on swinging at her, so she did. He collapsed onto the tiles and she ran to the neighbour's house screaming for help. They immediately got the ambulance on the phone, but blood was just pouring everywhere. By the time paramedics arrived, John was dead. And Samantha was trying to process what the hell had just happened. Not only had she been attacked, not only was her husband now dead, but she was also being arrested for murder. It's actually crazy how quick things can just change in an instant. And it was pretty wild in Malaysia. If you're given the death penalty, they hang you. This was no joke. She was terrified. She was shoved into a rat-infested cell to just sit there and think about what her fate might be. She was like, how the hell did we go from 17 years of marriage to this? In the end, she agreed to plead guilty to culpable homicide and was given 52 months behind bars. She was released in 2021, came back to the UK and just spent time with her family. And honestly, I hope she's doing well. For more cases like this, I post a brand new episode on my podcast, The Born Investigation, every single week.
I just think it's such a slap in the face, not only directly to her family members, her loved ones, everyone who showed up for her, but also a slap in the face to the mothers and the parents who have actually either lost a child or have been unable to get pregnant. I don't know, it's gross, really. Allegedly, Keir Cousins from Scotland faked her pregnancy, faked giving birth, faked having a real human child when in reality there was no baby. The baby was a doll. 22-year-old Keir Cousins meets a boy. They start dating. Keir falls pregnant. Her family as well as the baby daddy think, oh, well, this isn't really what we planned for since it's still very early on in your relationship, but we will support you if you want to go through with this. Keir wants to keep it. She's excited about having a baby. She's excited about being a mom, so she decides to go through with the pregnancy. And approximately around 4 months in, she celebrates with a baby shower. She has a gender reveal. She announces that she's having a baby girl. She's super excited about it. Everyone is celebrating, but that does not last too long because shortly after, Keir received some devastating news. The news came from her doctors. Her baby was diagnosed with a life-threatening heart defect, and she turned to social media to ask not only for privacy during this difficult time, but also for prayers and support. Keir expressed that she was thankful that they found this out when they did, because now doctors could work hard, do what they do to give her and her unborn child the treatment that they needed. Around this time, her family is feeling sorry for her, but they continue to support her. Keir keeps on posting on social media to share her pregnancy experience. She also makes sure to keep everyone updated on the frequent hospital visits and postnatal appointments. She's posting videos and pictures of the baby kicking her stomach, of clothing and presents that she received from her loved ones in preparation for her birth. It was a whole thing. And then on October 10th, Keir allegedly tells her family and friends that she has given birth all alone in the middle of the night. She also posts pictures on social media of her leaving the hospital with her baby in a car seat and claiming that she did not need help from anyone else. She confides in one of her closest friends, saying that the reason that she preferred to give birth alone was because her and the father of the baby had been arguing. Their relationship was going through a rough patch, and their relationship had gotten a little bit rocky, so she decided to just give birth on her own. Keir named her baby Bonnie Leigh Joyce, and according to her, she was born weighing 5 pounds and 4 ounces. And it's adamant that this little baby is so loved. Keir's family and friends are showing up for her, offering to help in any way that they can, giving her more gifts like strollers and car seats, all to make sure that Keira, as a young mom, first-time mom, feels supported. And then the time comes around for Bonnie Leigh to meet her father, since he has not met her yet because he wasn't there for the birth. Keir takes Bonnie over to his house. He's there, his mom is there, and his mom is eager to meet the baby, her granddaughter. So she does, and she's like, Bonnie is quite cold. She seems to be cold to the touch. She's also not moving and hardly making a sound, which is pretty unheard of for a newborn newborn baby, so Bonnie's grandma is now concerned. But not to worry, Kira says, I hear you, I agree, something's weird, but don't worry, I will rush her to the hospital by myself though, you can't come. I will take her to the hospital to make sure that everything is okay and I'll keep you guys posted. So that's what she does. Allegedly, she takes the baby to the hospital and the doctors tell her that she is okay, but she is a bit sick. So Kira is instructed to keep an eye on her and to most importantly, keep her wrapped up at all times so her body temperature stays warm. So she communicates this to her friends and family, and again, everyone understands and everyone is showing their support. Kira then decides to take the baby to her coworkers for them to be able to meet the baby. She has one of her friends drive her over to her place of work. The coworkers are gushing over this little baby. They're meeting her. Oh my goodness, she's so cute. They're all over the moon for Kira. Joy's in the air. Love is in the air. That same day, Kira agrees to take Bonnie over to her friend's mom's house because she wants to meet the baby. So she takes her there, and the friend's mom is so happy about this little baby. She's so happy for Kira. Oh my goodness, she's so cute. Can I hold her? And Kira says, oh, I know she's perfect. Whoa, hold on. You are not holding my baby. She is sickly. Do not dare touch my baby. She gets very defensive very quickly. That was suspicious. And other family members as well are starting to ask questions because they're like, have you heard Bonnie make a sound? No one has heard her make a noise. The baby, newborn baby, had not cried once. And then all of a sudden, the following day, all pictures of Bonnie are gone, deleted off social media as if she never existed. Nowhere to be found. And everyone close to Kira is now asking questions because what happened? We were all so excited, so happy about this new baby in the family, but all of a sudden her existence had been wiped away from social media. So her friends reach out to her wondering what was going on, what had happened, and that's when the world finds out that Kira Cousin's pregnancy, the birth of her baby, the actual baby, it was all a lie. It was all a calculated lie. There was no baby. Kira was never pregnant. She had bought different sizes of fake pregnancy bellies to fake her pregnancy. She never gave birth. She faked the entire thing, and Bonnie was actually a reborn doll that she had purchased. And allegedly, I'm not sure how true this is, but allegedly Kira texted the baby's father to let him know that Bonnie had passed away after her mother discovered that the baby never existed, but that's all she said. That was until everything came out that she faked the entire thing, and only then did Kira confess. On social media, she stated, quote, in my own words, let's set this straight. I was in bed when my mother came into my room and found it to be a doll. The next thing I know, I was confronted by all the family. Don't for 1 minute think that they let me get away with this. They haven't. None of them knew. Neither did the dad or his family. She continued, I don't have a proper excuse. Yeah, I wasn't in a good headspace, but that doesn't make what I did okay. I know this is going to stick with me for a long time and that I've probably lost friends that I'll never get back. I'm trying to figure myself out and get help because this version of me isn't someone I want to be. I know I've ruined a lot of trust and that sorry won't fix everything, but that's all that I can say right now, end quote. I read some reports that apparently the baby doll did move, but I'm not sure how true that is. And in another report, it said that the kind of doll that it was, you could feed her and it would go to the bathroom. Not sure how that would work. Like given that it's a doll, not a human. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said in the intro, it feels like a slap in the face towards women who have struggled to get pregnant, women who have actually lost their child, and just a slap in the face to everyone that gave Kira time and support and bought presents for the baby and dedicated so much time to taking care of this baby that was not real. Also, I'm just like, how does your brain like come up with this plan and then you're sitting in your room like texting people that like posting about the pregnancy, posting that your baby is kicking your stomach, and you're looking at it knowing that it's a lie, and you're like, yeah, this is perfect, I'm gonna post this. Weird behavior, but that is all I have for today. Let me know your thoughts on this because it is bizarre. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Don't fake a pregnancy because that is evil. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
He brutally SA'd his own daughter for hours, and nothing is being done about it. 18-year-old Michaela Settles moved to Moore Park to live with her biological father, Steven Chavez. Michaela had plans to attend Moore Park College and pursue her educational goals. Just 2 days after moving in, Steven provided Michaela with alcohol and waited until she was intoxicated. Once Michaela was intoxicated, Steven SA'd his own daughter for approximately 4 hours. After the assault, Michaela fled from the house barefoot and called her mom, begging her mom to come pick her up. When her family found her, Michaela was so severely injured that she couldn't even walk, and her uncle had to carry her. Michaela was taken to the hospital, and there they confirmed the presence of her father's DNA. Michaela also gave her statement to the police. Initially, Steven was arrested and charged, but as time went on, he was released. Michaela was so traumatized that 5 months after the assault, Michaela ended up taking her own life. This case is slowly starting to be forgotten about, because Michaela isn't alive to give her testimony in the courtroom, even though there is more than enough evidence. Stephen is currently out on bail, living his life free to do whatever he wants. Based on the current charges, the maximum sentence that Stephen may face is only 3 years in prison, which is absolutely mind-blowing and insane. But what do you guys think about this case?
A father would murder his disabled son because he was sick and tired of having to look after him. The details of this case are absolutely beyond horrifying. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Jory Lorette. Jory Kyler Joseph Lorette was born in April 2004. He was born 3 months premature, his parents being Jesslyn Lorette and Jeremiah Wright. From very early on, it was picked up on that Jory was different, and soon he would be diagnosed with several disorders and conditions, including cerebral palsy and a condition which affected his heart. Those paired along with other things meant that Jory had to spend his entire life being fed through a feeding tube. He needed to use a wheelchair, and he was also non-verbal. Jory was a very vulnerable child who needed constant care, love, compassion and attention, and that was something that Jesslyn was happy to give him. She would describe Jory as being her little star. Despite Jesslyn working, caring for a disabled adult in order to put food on the table, she was still Jory's primary caregiver over Jeremiah, who was unemployed. Jesslyn and Jeremiah had a very contentious relationship. At the time that this case takes place, they had been together for over a decade, and Jesslyn was actually planning to leave him. They would regularly argue over things such as money, and often the police would be called to their home in Thibodaux, Louisiana. Jeremiah would be arrested several times, however none of these arrests were for violent charges. In September 2004, when Jory is only 5 months old, Jeremiah would make a horrifying statement. He told Jesslyn that he wanted Jory dead, telling her, quote, "He was tired of seeing the baby suffer and wanted him dead, that I needed to do something about his suffering and end it all." On the 14th of August 2011, a man is walking along a street in Thibodaux when he noticed something perched on the edge of a driveway. As he got closer, he came to the realization that he was looking at the decapitated head of a child. This was the head of 7-year-old Jory Lorette. At the time of his death, he was a year 2 student, and students and teachers at his school absolutely loved him. Despite him not being able to return their kind words and gestures, they knew exactly how much Jory loved them back by the brightness of his smile. He was described as a sweet young boy who loved animals, bright colours, and he had a sweet tooth. His favourite snacks were lollies, ice cream and cookies. When police arrived to the scene, the first place that they wanted to search was the house that this head was found outside of. As they walked up to the door and went inside, they would discover an eerily, disturbingly calm Jeremiah who was head to toe covered in blood. It was determined by forensics and experts that Jeremiah had restrained Jory over the kitchen sink before decapitating him. He then went on to dismember the 7-year-old. His limbs would be found stuffed inside of several black bags throughout the home. Before his death, Jory had also been a victim to an excessive beating and bludgeoning, which resulted in excessive bleeding around his head. As the officers were inside and investigating and talking to Jeremiah, that is when Jesslyn would pull up to the home, absolutely mortified and horrified to see her own house covered in police tape. She had been out that morning, leaving Jory behind with Jeremiah so that she could get the family car fixed so that she could take Jory to a doctor's appointment that afternoon. Little did she know that only 30 minutes after leaving, Jeremiah would murder Jory in the most disturbing, barbaric, horrific, sadistic way. During interviews, Jeremiah would tell the detectives exactly what he'd done, giving over a complete confession. He even told them that the reason he left Jory's head outside on the driveway was because he wanted Jesslyn to find it. He wanted Jesslyn to feel stupid for finding Jory's decapitated head. At one point, he expressed to the detectives that he committed the murder because he was tired of caring for Jory. He was disabled and simply had too many additional needs. Then all of a sudden, sudden, Jeremiah said no, he didn't actually kill Jory. He killed a dummy/robot that was planted in his house by the government who was spying on him. Jeremiah Wright would be deemed unfit to stand trial, and he was sent to a mental health facility for treatment. While here, he allegedly told one of the employees there that he wasn't worried about an impending trial because, quote, "I have a good family and a good lawyer. I'm on easy street." In 2014, after a court hearing, it is now 3 years after the murder, Jeremiah Wright would be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Experts believe that at the time of Jory's killing, Jeremiah was delusional, he was incompetent, and that he genuinely believed that he was killing a dummy planted in his house by the government. Jeremiah was ordered to be held indefinitely within a state mental health facility. This is where he will remain until he is deemed no longer a risk to himself or the people surrounding him.
Here's a little UFO alien history lesson for you, the story of the biggest UFO cover-up in history. In early July 1947, something fell out of the sky and crashed at a ranch outside of Roswell, New Mexico. The rancher went to inspect the crash site, and he was so confused and shocked about what he saw that he called his local sheriff. Well, the sheriff goes to the crash site, and when he sees what fell out of the sky, he contacts a colonel at the nearby Roswell military base. And then that colonel contacted his higher up, a general for the US Air Force. So that general ordered an intelligence officer named Major Jesse Marcel to go investigate the crash site and recover what had fallen out of the sky. And then the very next day, a lieutenant for the US military issued a press release about the Roswell crash site, stating that the US military was now in possession of a flying saucer. And what's especially cool about that is the very next day after the press release, the local newspaper's front page story was about this press release. So it's really, really cool that we have on record the government saying that they had a flying saucer in their possession. But within 24 hours of the lieutenant's press release, the US military and government retracted the entire story, saying that the entire thing was a big misunderstanding, and what actually crashed at the ranch in Roswell, New Mexico was a weather balloon. A general for the US Air Force actually released this photo claiming that this pile of tinfoil and sticks is what was recovered, and that a rancher, sheriff, and multiple high-rank military officials confused this with a flying saucer. The rancher, who was the one to originally find the UFO on his ranch, spoke with his local news station and claimed that not only did he discover this UFO, but multiple alien bodies that were like no taller than 4 feet tall were also found at the crash site and taken by the military. This conversation would actually never be aired on the radio station, and the owner of the radio station says that's because they got a call from a US senator that warned them not to air it. And afterwards, that rancher would actually also retract his story and say that he did not find a spaceship, he actually only found a pile of tinfoil and sticks. But his family would later claim that he only retracted his story after he was detained by the military, and afterwards he came into a lot of money, which seems to me like he was threatened and bribed to stop talking about UFOs. The locals of Roswell also claimed that they were threatened by the military to keep quiet, and that their homes were ransacked looking for anything that anyone might have taken from the crash site. And after this, the story about what really happened in Roswell, New Mexico was buried for decades, until the people that were witnesses to the UFO crash site and the military's massive cover-up of it started to come forward. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 witnesses, I'm talking hundreds of witnesses with the same story, talking about spacecrafts and technology that were not from this planet, alien bodies, secret autopsies. And some of these witnesses were everyday people, but some of them were scientists and high-ranking military personnel. Like Major Jesse Marcel, who, if you remember, was the first one ordered to actually investigate the crash site and recover whatever fell out of the sky. He said whatever crashed out of the sky was definitely not a weather balloon and was something not from this planet. He said that the metal that the spacecraft was made out of was thinner than a piece of tinfoil and felt like nothing when you were holding it in your hand, but was so strong that when you would hit it with a sledgehammer, the sledgehammer would bounce right off of it and wouldn't even make a dent. And personally, I've never heard anything like that before, especially not in 1947. What's crazy is dozens of high-ranking military personnel have gone on the record talking about this same mysterious metal. They all said that it was smooth and thin like a piece of tinfoil, and parts of it were able to be folded or even crumpled up into a little ball. but once you would let go of it, it would just spring back into its original form with no creases or anything in it. What do you guys think? Should I just go like full conspiracy theorist and just make myself like a little tinfoil hat? And remember, this is what generals, colonels, majors, sergeants for the US military went on the record describing as their firsthand accounts of what they saw and experienced. And the official story was that it was this weather balloon, remember this photo that the general took and released? And well, funny thing about that photo, do you remember the lieutenant that was the one who originally put out that first press release that the US military had a flying saucer in their possession? Well, he wrote a letter and he put it in a sealed envelope, and he said that he did not want this envelope read until after he died. In that letter, he said that this photo was a hoax, that the actual materials that the US military had from the Roswell crash site were just substituted with this random weather balloon for this photo to be taken and released to the public. And dozens of US military personnel have also gone on the record discussing these alien bodies that were allegedly found at the crash site, saying that they either heard other people talking about them or actually saw them for themselves. And that the US government and military did secret autopsies and tests on these little alien bodies. If you wanted to request to read the official records and files from the Roswell crash incident, you can't, because every single record from that year from the Roswell military base were destroyed. But who destroyed them and why has never been uncovered. So things are clearly looking a little sketchy and suspicious, and it's pretty obvious that there's more to the story than just a simple weather balloon crashed in the desert. Well, in the 1990s, the US military actually did confirm that the Roswell incident was a cover-up. But instead of it just being a simple weather balloon that fell out of the sky, it was a really special fancy weather balloon that were being used in this top secret program to detect any possible nuclear testing being done by Soviet Russia. And that the alien bodies that hundreds of people have claimed to have seen from the Roswell crash site were actually test dummies from a completely different thing unrelated to the weather balloon, where in the mid-1950s, the military was testing parachutes with like test dummies. Which doesn't even make sense as an explanation because this happened in 1950s and the Roswell crash was in 1947. I hope this wasn't too confusing. I find this so interesting. I hope you guys did too. Let me know what you think happened. Do you think it was a cover-up? Do you think it was a cover-up but just a special top secret weather balloon? Or do you think aliens actually crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments while you're there. Let me know if you like this kind of video, me doing my little makeup for you. Until then, I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another video.
I believe it was John Ramsey in the basement with the baseball bat. I still get asked very often what my theory is on John Benet Ramsey, so I'm going to try to give it to you as detailed as I possibly can. I believe the Ramseys arrived home at 10 p.m. like they said per their first police reports. I believe that Patsy did some packing for their trip the next day to Michigan, and I believe John Ramsey read to Burke and John Benet as he said he did. Patsy says that she put John Benet in her red turtleneck to sleep. Did she or didn't she? She next says that she put her in the white star top that John Benet would be found in. Whether the turtleneck is part of it or not, I don't know, but it was on the bathroom counter balled up. So I believe whatever she was put into bed wearing, she then changed into her Barbie nightgown. The Barbie nightgown is important because it was found with her body, not on her body, but with her body with a couple spots of blood on it. I believe she changed into that to go to bed. Her dad came in. We know that experts agreed that she had been abused prior. I have 2 pinned videos, if you haven't seen them, about the experts and her medical records. So I think that that night that happened again, and maybe he hurt her and knew that this was the last time it was going to be found out. Or I think it's possible she also told him she was done, she didn't want to do this, and she was going to tell. I believe she was crying and upset. We know this because she had mucus in her stomach and on her nose. I believe this may be where the couple spots of blood come from on her nightgown. Then he tells her, go ahead, change, I will clean it. She puts back on the long johns and the star top that she was wearing. He tells her, let's go downstairs, I'll get you a snack to cheer her up. They go downstairs, he makes the pineapple. Perhaps he grabs the bowl with a towel. Perhaps he puts on gloves at this point because he already knows what he's going to do. I believe JonBenet plucks one piece out without using the spoon, but she really can't eat because she's upset. This is when he grabs a box of Kleenex and puts it on the table for her because she's upset. And Patsy later confirms that this box of Kleenex is out of place. This is when he goes and gets the bat out of the garage. The bat has basement carpet fibers on it, and it was also found outside the butler's door, which leads outside. We also have a neighbor saying that they heard metal hitting concrete in the middle of the night. I believe he then takes her downstairs under the pretense that there are more presents down there. Surprise. I believe she is then struck in the head from behind in the room leading to the cellar. I believe he then goes upstairs, grabs the Barbie nightgown, grabs a blanket out of the dryer, possibly rummages through Patsy Ramsey's medical supplies because we know that drawer was open in John Andrews' bedroom, which Patsy Ramsey used for chemo, and maybe grabbed some wipes, rubber gloves, anything to clean her up. I believe he may possibly even grab Burke's knife to frame him. I believe he then sets this stuff aside and begins writing the note. We know that there is 45 minutes to 2 hours between the head blow and the strangulation. I believe he then goes downstairs, finishes the job outside of the wine cellar because we know that there is a urine stain and that her bladder likely released. She's face down when this happens because the urine is only on the front of her pajamas. I believe he then takes her into the wine cellar, does all the things, and then cleans her up. I believe the items that were not found, the tape, the rope, and the other piece of the paintbrush were hidden somewhere in that giant house, buried in the backyard, taken out to somebody else's trash. There is ample opportunity for anything to happen to those items. I believe the note was written to John, but for Patsy. So John was to be in charge, but Patsy was to find it. That's why it was left on her staircase that she used every morning. Now time is running out. The alarm is going to go off. I believe he runs upstairs and jumps in the shower to be in there when Patsy awakes. I believe he fully hoped Patsy would not call 911 and he would be able to remove the body. However, she called 911 immediately and ruined the entire plan. And that's what I believe happened to JonBenet Ramsey. But this is just a theory. This is all alleged. It should not be taken as fact. At least any parts that are opinion or theorized.
This is the story of Lakita Coyer and Sharon Patterson. Lakita was born February 25th, 1987 in Detroit, Michigan. And for what I read, she had a pretty normal upbringing. She lived with her mother and her grandmother. Academically, she was smart. She brought home good grades. But her mother and her grandmother did not approve of the way she dressed, her lifestyle, liking women. She was clearly, in the picture, she looked like, a baby stud. Lakita's mother worked multiple jobs, so most of the time she would just be at home with her grandmother. And her grandmother criticized her the most about her looks. So the two would kind of bump heads a lot. But Lakita decided to join the basketball team, and this is where she met Sharon Patterson. Lakita was 16 and Sharon was 17. Now, Sharon really didn't have no solid foundation. She was couch surfing. She was going from house to house. But the two hit it off quickly. The flirting started on the court, and it led Lakita to start sneaking Sharon into the house. With Lakita's mother working all types of jobs and all types of hours, it was easy to sneak Sharon in and out the house. Sharon would even hide in a closet at times. And then one day, Lakita asked her mother if her friend could spend the night, but she was playing it like, can one of my best friends come and stay the night? But it was really just her secret lover, Sharon. And Lakita's mother agrees, but the sleepovers were becoming frequent. And Sharon wasn't even no good house guest. She would leave her shit out, food out, eat up all the food, don't clean up after herself. And on top of all of that, got the nerve to have a smart mouth talking back to Lakita's mother, her grandmother. One night while Sharon was sleeping over, Lakita's mother got off of work early. And when she got in the house, She seen Larkita and Sharon. I don't know if they was cuddling. I don't know if they was kissing, but they was doing something that they wasn't supposed to be doing in that house. And Larkita's mother flips. She said there will be no more sleepovers. And if Sharon is going to be here, I have to be here. No unsupervised visits. The girls are pissed by this, but they still like, okay, well, at least we can still see each other. But the two fucked it up again. And Larkita's mother is like, you know what? Don't even worry about it. Sharon got to get the hell up out of here, and she can't even come back. So now the girls are livid. They're in that teenage love obsession craze state. Yeah, they can see each other at school, but clearly these two want to have sex, and they won't be able to do that if Sharon can't come back over. So on Wednesday, September 17th, 2003, the two decided to leave school early. They knew Larkita's mother would be at work, and they know that Grandma Bertha is at the crib, but they like, we can sneak past her. The two snuck in the basement and got on the couch. Now they started making out and, going to second and third base, but I don't know if they was too loud or they knocked something over. But Grandma Bertha hops up like, what was that? She creeps downstairs and couldn't believe her eyes. Grandma Bertha saw Larkita and Sharon doing things that they wasn't supposed to be doing. Sharon ain't even supposed to be here. She told Larkita, if you don't get this girl out of my house, I'm going to call the police on her. And Larkita's like, okay, just give us a minute. And she said, you have 5 minutes. Grandma Bertha went back upstairs and sat back in her favorite recliner. But downstairs, Larkita is livid. She said, I hate that bitch. And Sharon said, you know what? We could get her on up out of here, get her on out of our way. And the two came up with a plan. The two found a hammer and came up with a plan that Sharon would choke Grandma Bertha while Larkita hit her with the hammer. But when it was time to put that plan into action, Larkita got cold feet. She like, no, this is my grandmother. I don't think I could do this. But Sharon is like, fuck it, I'll do it. The two ambushed Grandma Bertha while she was in her recliner. Sharon hit her with the claw part of the hammer repeatedly, so hard that it got lodged in Grandma Bertha's face. I think I read that it went in her front lip and was stuck between her tongue and her bottom lip. Crazy read. The two are looking at all this blood and looking at Grandma Bertha's lifeless body and in shock. The two didn't know what to do. And Sharon said, well, let's just burn the house down. And Larkita said, we have gasoline in the garage or basement, I believe. And Larkita went and got the gas can, poured it over her grandmother, and lit her on fire. The two calmly left the house, closed the door behind them, and walked to the nearest movie theater. The movie out at that time was Jeepers Creepers. They bought 2 tickets and popcorn and sat down and watched that movie. But what they didn't know is the neighbors seen them calmly walking down the street, but didn't think anything about it. But when the house started to become ablaze, that same neighbor was the one to call the police. Larkita's mother pulled up to her house ablaze, cops everywhere. She doesn't know what the hell is going on. When they finally got the fire tamed, they discovered Grandma Bertha still sitting in her chair with that hammer lodged into her skull. That's when they knew that this was no accident, on top of the neighbor saying that he seen the girls leaving the house right before the house caught on fire. As all of this is going on, these two walk up as calmly as ever. It was really nothing they could say. It wasn't like they was in shock, like, what's going on? They just walked up looking crazy. And they was immediately arrested. And as soon as these two got into the interrogation room, they turned on each other. Sharon said that she had nothing to do with this and that she did not kill Grandma Bertha and that it was all Larkita. And the next day when they questioned her some more, she admitted that she lied. She said, okay, I did hit her with the hammer, but Larkita put the hammer in my hand, and she went to go get the gasoline, and she went to turn up the radio so nobody could hear Grandma Bertha's screams. But Larkita admitted it. She said, yes, I was supposed to give the blows to Grandma Bertha, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I did give Sharon the hammer, and I went to go turn the radio up, and I did douse my grandmother in gasoline. But the whole idea was Sharon's. The two were charged with felony murder, arson, and first-degree murder. Their trial started in March of 2004, and it was a separate trials, but they aligned, so it was like they was on trial together anyway. They were being charged as adults, and they tried to plead insanity, but that did not work. They were both fit to stand trial. They even was offered a plea deal and declined. These two were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That plea was offering second-degree murder, so they would have got way less time. But very recently, the law changed. Because they were minors when they committed the crime, life is considered a too harsh of a punishment. So both of their sentence has been commuted. It no longer says life. It says 40 to 60 years. Now, they still got a long time till they get parole, but they shit don't say life no more. This is a recent picture of them. They are in separate penitentiaries, and they did say, each other was the love of their life. I don't know if they still feel that way, but Yellow Tape, how do y'all feel about this?